Hello and welcome to Season 4 of On the Irregular with me, Java Berry. In previous seasons, I've chatted to women from all walks of life about their unique creative journeys, how they got here and how their story has shaped their creative process. For this season, I wanted to specifically explore the way in which grief informs the creative process, how transformative it can be, and how it weaves its way through our lives in many tangled ways, how it manifests in our work, and how we navigate the endless twists and turns. I cannot wait for you to hear these conversations. Each one moved me in a profound way, and often made me laugh and cry simultaneously. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to On the Irregular Season 4 on creativity and grief. In this episode, I talk with multidisciplinary artist Jess Kidd. We discuss Jess's childhood as an acutely shy child who often lived in her own imaginary world, the comfort she found in creativity as a form of expressing herself, and then the challenges she experienced at art school and then being diagnosed with health issues that impacted her life dramatically. We also talk about cognitive behavioural therapy and the place it has in her creative process. We talk about her multidisciplinary practice and the solace she finds in nature. Welcome to my chat with the ever so gentle and thoughtful Jess Kidd. A gentle warning, this episode contains swearing. Jess, welcome to On the Irregular. Thank you for agreeing to talk to me. Oh no, it's an absolute pleasure and honour. You describe yourself as a mixed media multidisciplinary artist. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, definitely. I think right now I'm kind of going through a phase where I'm loving painting, but in the past I've explored other things, and I'll always be open to just, exploring whatever feels right with what it is I'm trying to communicate.
Well, would you like to tell me a bit about your background? I know that you grew up in Keighley, near me in West Yorkshire.
Sure. So I'm one of 4 kids, and we're all quite close in age and really get on well. And so I had quite a happy sort of start to my life, and really happy at home. I really struggled to learn to talk, and I'm quite dyslexic. Luckily, my mum and dad were really quite clued up about stuff like that. Like my mum sort of worked with kids with additional needs and in education and things, so she had like a lot of knowledge. So I found, just from as early as I can remember, just being creative, especially at home, was such a good outlet for me and like a good way to communicate or get rid of a load of frustration. I think I used to have a lot of frustration because I couldn't communicate very well. And then I did struggle at school because I think I was just so shy. I was incredibly happy at home, but out in the big wide world, I was very nervous, and I don't really know why, but I think at school, maybe because I'd struggled to talk, when I did talk, it was then quite a big issue, and kids would be like, "Oh, Jessie's talking." So I think when you're little, it doesn't feel as such a big deal. Like kids will play side by side, but then when we moved to Keighley, I didn't know anybody, and I was suddenly kind of labelled a posh kid because I didn't have a Keighley accent. I was from North Yorkshire. And so again, like talking was more of an issue. Again, people would like notice my voice and if I talked and things. So I did have some friends, had some really close friends, but I would retreat into myself a lot, and I was really a big daydreamer. So I was talking to my dad yesterday, actually, and he was laughing because he remembered a time when he was talking to me as a teenager, and I was telling him about something that had happened. I think maybe I was telling him about a memory from when we were little, and he realized, it's like dawned on him that what I was talking about hadn't even happened, and it was completely in my imagination.
Oh wow! But it was that vivid and that clear that it became a memory.
Yeah. And then I often talk to my sister Molly, my big sister Moll. She often knew when I was little and I was struggling to talk, she often knew what it was that I was trying to say or what I wanted. And we often laugh about it now. Like I've often like said things to her, and she's like, Jess, that never happened. So
Well, so it's almost like you had a whole other parallel life,
yeah, yeah.
eternal
So
life. I mean, that's going to make you an artist, isn't it?
yeah. So yeah, I was completely in my own world. So I think when I got older, especially when you get into like the teenage years where everything's a bit scary, like it's so daunting, people trying to work out who they are.
Mm.
And, you know, I found that too much. It was kind of like, um, you know, when other people were probably just having fun, acting daft and, you know, maybe testing the boundaries a bit, I just wanted to hide. I couldn't handle sort of thinking about who I was, and I just my escapism was art. So I mean, at school, to be honest, the art wasn't great. We weren't really allowed to make a mess, and it was mainly just drawing with pencils. And but when I got home, like, you know, most kids were probably out partying and having fun. I was at home being creative
Yeah.
and just losing myself in it. So in lots of ways, I was very happy because I just really enjoyed that. But I was absolutely dying to leave school. I couldn't bear it. I was just like ready to burst kind of thing.
You know, when you say that you know, at that age, people are often trying to, you know, figure out who they are, and but you weren't interested in that. It was too much. Is
Mm,
that because that felt like something that was external, that meant about how others perceived you, and like you were talking about the self-consciousness that you'd felt anyway about when you did talk, and how people would, you know, suddenly pay attention, and so the whole kind of figuring out who you are as a teenager is very much kind of like your identity, the way you dress and the music that you're into and how others see you from the
mm.
outside, rather than as much the internal world, I guess. Did it feel like again like too much pressure?
Yeah, I think you've got it exactly right there. Like I think quite a lot of times I haven't really known what how to put that into words and like kind of um really understood why I found that too much. But yeah, I think that's really good, like how you've just summed it up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think, I mean, when I got older, I think I probably had that phase of like what people go through when they're a teenager a bit later on. I was like a little bit slow
Yeah.
to grow up. um, so yeah, I mean, I left school before doing A levels, so I went to college and I studied uh, art ABCE, which is a bit like a BTEC, I think. So
Hmm.
you basically get loads of different chances to try out different kinds of art, sculpture, photography, and it's really exciting. And I think being somewhere new with completely different people who didn't know me, that was quite a relief.
Yeah, it can be really
Um,
liberating, can't it?
yeah, I was still incredibly shy at that point, but it was like a step in the right direction. And then I went to Leeds to do my foundation for a year, and that was absolutely amazing. The teachers there were really inspiring, and I met so many more people. I don't know, it kind of took the pressure off a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, but I did this project from on my foundation course where um, I think I was really getting to a point where I was unhappy with how I was being so shy and stuff. Um, and so I did a project where I kind of like faced my own inhibitions and faced my fear.
Yeah.
And I sort of focused on myself, which was like my worst nightmare. And I did loads of different things. So like one thing I did was I made a mask of my own face, and it kind of I used things like latex, so it looked really lifelike. And then I made myself walk around Leeds wearing this mask. It
Wow.
was a bit it was a bit weird because it was you know it looked like me, but it obviously was a mask. It was really creepy. But having that thing where I was walking around and everybody was like looking at me and thinking like, what on earth? Like,
That's
it was
incredibly
really
brave. Wow, considering you know describe yourself as shy and self-conscious.
yeah.
That's but at the same time wearing a mask, there's still like a
Mm,
barrier between you and the world in a way.
yeah.
That's so interesting.
I think that was when I realized how much art meant to me and how powerful it could be and kind of um I was so passionate about my art that it gave me that that confidence to do it, and doing it, it made me realize nothing bad's going to happen. Like, yeah, people are staring at me, but who cares? Like, it kind of liberated me quite a lot. And I did lots of other stuff too, like drawing around my body in really awkward ways, and doing like recording little habits I had, like nervous habits, and then amplifying them in a space. And it was really good for me, like mentally,
Yeah.
like my own art therapy, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then when I went on, so I went on to do my degree in London, and I studied 4D fine art. So it was at Central St. Martin's, and it was kind of like ideas based. So in my head, I like, I think from being little, art for me was all about kind of communicating something or sort of processing something. So I love painting. I still love painting now, but I kind of wanted to let what it was I was trying to communicate lead what form it took. So when I went to London, I don't know really. I kind of I didn't get into my course that much. Like, I loved my foundation course, but I think possibly that's when I hit the stage where most people would have gone through as a teenager. I kind of, I don't know, I was working through something. I'd got a bit more confident, and I was suddenly thrown into a world where we could have a lot of fun, party a lot, and I didn't love my course. I felt a bit lost in London. The course was, I guess I found it quite hard to communicate with people on my course and my tutors. I had situations like one day we were having a crit, and we were all told to kind of put our work out in a room, and they'd go around and talk about our work. But when someone was talking about your work, you couldn't say anything. And when they started talking about my work, I didn't understand the words people were using. Like, people were so intellectual, and I think they were trying to sound intelligent.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. And so I did actually say, I know I'm not going to say anything, but could you maybe just rephrase that, because I don't understand the words you're using.
Yeah.
And the tutor just sort of stared at me for a moment, and then moved on. And so I kind of didn't get anything from that.
That's so unsupportive. God.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I don't want to be too complaining, because I did get a lot from being in London. Like, I had a lot of time to just let off some steam and grow up a lot. And I met some really lovely people. It was amazing just living in London. Like, I loved just getting to know all the different communities within London, and I spent most of my time walking around and finding all the little shortcuts and all the back streets and things, and just people watching, really. So I kind of, towards the end of my degree, I guess mentally, you're at that age where you're ready to just throw yourself into the world, and I had a lot of energy. And I think because I've been so shy, and I was still incredibly nervous about the world, I guess, and being an adult, I kind of felt like whilst I was in London, I'd push myself and try and be independent from my parents, like work full time. So when it got to my degree, to the end of my degree, I was kind of ready to just go for it with being an adult, living life.
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily sure what I was doing with my art at that stage. I think I'd kind of had a little bit enough of the whole art world, and I kind of needed a bit of a mental break from things. But I'd done an internship at a place called Orleans House Gallery, and it was like a kind of community art service and a gallery at the same time. And I worked in the education department there, and absolutely loved it. And then I got a job working with teenagers with severe and complex needs in a special school, which I absolutely loved. And I also worked in a kids' theatre just as an usher for a few years. So I had lots of different things going on, and lots of friends, and I was enjoying it. Well, I thought I was happy. And then at the end of my degree, my auntie Anne was diagnosed with cancer.
Sorry.
And she actually died within a month, which was like
Wow.
massive, massive shock. And really the first sort of big tragedy for me to go through. And my family, I mean, in some ways, we've been very, very lucky. But my auntie Anne was like, she was like a friend, like a best friend. She was absolutely amazing, and she had, you know, her own kids who were like young teenagers, so really needed their mum, and that was like just a massive, massive shock and absolutely horrible. And then basically, somewhere along the way, I contracted TB, tuberculosis, which was completely random. I didn't know I had it for ages. So I was trying to like work really hard and live this busy life that I'd been really excited about. But I was gradually like losing a lot of weight, getting incredibly tired, having all sorts of aches and pains. And I thought I was just like failing and struggling to live in London. And so I was really struggling. And I remember my granddad got really poorly, and I came home to be with him and be with my mum. And he actually died in front of me.
Oh, Jess.
Absolutely horrible. And I had a panic attack there and then in the hospital. And it was weird because I couldn't breathe. And when I look back at it now, I've realised that I was actually really poorly, but I just didn't realise it.
Yeah.
So I remember like the nurses were like rushing around me, even though my granddad had just died. It was really embarrassing. So I came back to London and I was just like, I want to go home. I can't do this. So I quit my job and I left at the end of the term because I was working at school. And then when I got home, I still tried to find a job, and I got a job working in a house with adults with severe and complex needs, and I struggled with that. And it just over the next few months, sort of running up to Christmas, I think my mum realised that I wasn't okay, and my symptoms got more severe, mainly the pain. I woke up one night and I had a stabbing pain in my back, and it was kind of like I couldn't move. I was in so much pain. And that's when I thought maybe I should go to the doctors.
Yeah. So how long have you been living with the symptoms by this point?
When I look back at it, when I first noticed like this pain in my back, and I think it'd been about a year.
Wow.
And they said I probably had pleurisy, another kind of sort of lung infection, and I was put on antibiotics.
Wow.
And then they just never did anything. The antibiotics didn't do anything. So I literally went on for about, I think it was Easter, where I had quite a traumatic day where I was at home. So at this point, I was living back at home with mum and dad. I didn't have the job anymore. I actually quit the job because I'd only just started it, and I felt like I was letting them down. I didn't know what was wrong with me. Because this sort of thing of, I kind of would go back to the doctors every week and they'd try me on a different kind of antibiotic, and it just never helped. So it got to about Easter, so quite a few months later. And I had a day where it was like I couldn't move, and I've got this memory of just being on the floor and just thinking, this isn't okay. I don't know what's going on. My mum basically just cried on the doctor and said, look, this isn't working. Something's wrong. Like, it's, can't just keep taking more antibiotics. Like, she's not okay, kind of thing. So I went to hospital, and they did I'd already had lots of scans, x-rays, but they did a CT scan. And then that revealed that I had TB, because you can see the shape of the scarring that it creates on your lungs. Right. So yeah, it's just basically with TB, it's such a slow bacteria to grow that actually it takes ages to get rid of. So I had about a year ahead of me of recovering from it. Yeah. So I had basically a year of living at home. For quite a lot of it, I still couldn't do much. So I had very little energy. I'd had a lot of muscle wastage. So I kind of, just doing everyday things like hoovering, getting up and down to make your food or do some shopping or whatever. I was just exhausted. So that was quite mentally quite quite hard.
Yeah.
I think it's taken me quite a few years to kind of like build my confidence back up and kind of my sense of self-worth and things.
Yeah.
Like I kind of felt like a child again, and it taken me quite a lot of energy to get myself out into the world already.
Yeah, I can understand that, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was weird because, I mean, now looking back, weirdly, I don't really have any regrets about anything. And in some ways, coming back home and being forced to have time out of life
Mm-hmm.
kind of made me have to face up to a lot of things that were going on in my head and face up to a lot of insecurities. And at the end of it all, I feel like I've come out stronger. And it's little things like if I hadn't come home, I wouldn't have met my husband, Archie. And I kind of started to realize how much like family was important to me, nature was important to me. I started learning about like self-care and, you know, just spending time in nature and slowing down. At the time, it was kind of like I felt like I sort of had lost the life I thought I had. And then later on in life, it's affected other things. So one, it's sort of it's kind of had lasting damage on me. Like I'm now starting to feel like myself again. Just this last year, I've done a lot more work-wise and feeling a lot stronger. But for ages, like my immune system's being rubbish. I think after taking so many antibiotics, it really wiped me out. And I've got another condition now called secondary adrenal insufficiency. And they don't really know why I've got this condition, but it could be linked to the TB.
Right.
So TB often causes something called Addison's disease, where the TB attacks your adrenal glands. And at first they thought I had that, but actually it's my pituitary gland, which is linked to your adrenal glands. So I've got like all the same symptoms. And there's not really any other reason why this would have happened. So they're kind of assuming it might be the TB. And then also things like fertility, like whenever I've been to see doctors and things and had fertility treatment, they've always said like it's unexplained infertility, but it all feels like it's linked together.
Gosh, so it sounds like you've had to work from a quite stripped back place several times in your life.
Yeah.
From a very how in a way how fortunate, but I guess it also goes hand in hand with having a strong internal life and finding your sense of self in like you were saying, in communicating through being creative when you were a child, struggling with talking and then struggling with a kind of like the external sense of identity and then being in London in a new town and all of everything that brings and kind of building some strength in some areas and then feeling that you're being pulled back again with the TB diagnosis and the grief that you were experiencing. And it's like your life, to me, I kind of see it as like your life kind of expanding and then going smaller again and then having to kind of really stretch again to expand it again. And then, and that sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
Absolutely exhausting, but also like you were saying, that it's also strengthened you in many ways and what you've gained from it and how it's infused and manifesting in your work.
Yeah. I think I always feel like I'm making a fuss when I talk about it, because it's kind of like I'm very lucky. I've got a really supportive family. I found Archie, who I absolutely adore. I'm living in a beautiful place right now. I'm incredibly lucky. But just what you're just saying then about being like stripped back. After I had my TB, I then felt again like I had to prove that I could be an independent adult, like a normal person. And I tried really hard to work full time. And I think it's that thing when you're poorly. I'd never been seriously poorly before. And whenever I had been poorly when I was younger, I always woke up and thought, it's like one day you wake up and you feel better. And it's like, oh, right, I'm better now. And with the TB, it just never really happens. So I started volunteering at a local special school. And the head teacher there was really supportive of me. And he kind of gave me loads of great opportunities. And I gradually built myself back up. And then I started working full time there. And I had about 4 years there. And I really enjoyed it. I loved working with the kids. And it was quite a creative job. I got loads of opportunities to do things like I made a sensory garden and I worked in a kind of sensory room where I made different environments and things.
Mm-hmm.
But it was years later that then I started to struggle again. The thing I've got now, the secondary adrenal insufficiency, which is a pituitary gland condition. When I was working back there, I worked for about 4 years, and it was the sort of thing where when I've been working with kids in the past, I'd always been really kind of calm. But because of this condition that I've got, it affects my cortisol levels. So I wasn't making enough cortisol.
Yeah.
And luckily, they found out what I needed before, because most people are diagnosed with this condition when they go into crisis. So it's a bit like when you have diabetes,
Yes.
and because your body isn't making enough of this thing. I think if you have too much adrenaline, if you experience some kind of trauma, then the cortisol doesn't come in to then calm yourself down. So you can go into shock, and people can die from it. So I was kind of, when things were happening in the room, say if someone was having having a seizure or something, some kind of emergency, I was going like really shaky, faint, couldn't breathe, and people were worrying about me, and I was like, I just thought, this isn't right. I'm meant to be looking after these children, and people are worrying about me. I'm making the situation worse. I've had so many weird times where I don't know what's going on in my own body.
Yeah.
And it's really knocked my confidence. And it's like, I've just been starting to get going again. So when I was doing that job, working with the kids, I was gaining my confidence back. Absolutely loved it. And then I had to stop it again. And in the end, I just came out of work again and had some time off. And that's when I started to really think, I haven't really been that creative recently. So I kind of tried to make myself have some time to explore my materials again. But yeah, it was kind of just a roller coaster.
Yeah, of course. And I guess in some ways, like we were sort of talking about earlier, about everything being stripped back and not knowing what's going on in your body. And I don't know what I imagine it must have felt like, having very little control over a really huge fundamental part of just your existence.
Yeah.
So where can you find some kind of control, or some agency, something? And I imagine that that's possibly what happened with, returning to your materials and your artwork. It's like, okay, well, where can I have some control?
Yeah. And I think it was that thing, it being such a large part of my identity.
Yeah.
Since being a tiny child, and I've been completely neglecting it. And so when I did start being creative again, it was like a massive relief in a way. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to make work about, and I'd completely lost my confidence with it.
That's, in a way, I sometimes think that's a really good place to be.
Yeah.
When you're just like at ground zero, and you have, it's just like, I don't know, I don't even know if I can do this, let alone what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so it kind of opens you up to such freedom and to make mistakes.
I think I really realised that now. At the time, I didn't know it. And it's one of those weird things, again, if I hadn't been through all this, I don't know what I would have done with my art and where I was going with it. But this is, it's really grounded me and made me get in touch with things that mean a lot to me. So something that's really helped me is cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yeah.
And at first I was just using it for myself. I've struggled a lot of anxiety in my life, and at times depression. But I think I've always had this kind of spark of determination in me. So I've always sought out help, and I've tried different kinds of therapy. And at first, years ago when I had TB, I think the GP suggested cognitive behavioural therapy. And at that time, it wasn't the right time, and it just didn't click with me. But coming back to it again, it really helps. But in the long run, it's kind of fed into my creative practice. So cognitive behavioural therapy it kind of teaches you about how your thoughts and your feelings and your behaviour, and then how things react to you, are kind of all interlinked. So if you try to kind of challenge one of the things, it can affect all the outcomes in that relationship.
Yeah.
So, if you're having negative thoughts, like if I'm starting to maybe try out playing with my materials, and I'm thinking, this is going to be rubbish, what will people think, and all this stuff, it teaches you how different techniques of how to challenge those negative thoughts. So now I've got on my wall now in front of me, actually, being creative is fun, making mistakes is part of the process. And that's just something I used to tell myself all the time. If I started to have a negative thoughts, I'd kind of teach myself just first of all notice these negative thoughts and catch myself out, and then you try to like reverse them. And it can feel really like hard at first, but then when you start to sort of build it into your everyday routine, it can have a really good effect on your confidence. So now when I'm being creative, like, because it's something you have to work at all the time. So, it's quite a few years later and I'm still using all these techniques. So when I'm being creative now, I just really try to like lose myself in the process. And I guess it's like mindfulness. I just really try to sort of take in how things feel, like if I'm using paint, the kind of paint, that how it feels and smells. And I'll just have a phase where I have fun making marks with completely random found objects. And it's all just about enjoying the process. I'll explore colours and work out what kind of colours I love, but then like dare myself to choose colours that I hate, and and just just having fun with it. So if I'm painting now, I'm actually painting things at the minute that are quite literal, like the kind of I want things in my paintings to look like places where I live that are recognizable. But the whole process is made up of me either having like layers where I'm working quite abstractly because I'm just kind of going with the moment and enjoying that moment and having fun, or if I'm really wanting to focus on something and paint something accurately, I kind of enjoying that because it kind of takes your head away from everything that's going on in your life. You can kind of like really focus on something and it can be really calming. So I kind of like mix it up a bit and have like bits of time where I'm completely letting go and then bits of time where I'm really focused.
You mentioned in your email about losing your mother-in-law and your grandmother in the same year.
Yeah. So that's quite recent. And well, it'll actually be nearly 2 years since we lost Julie. So that's my mother-in-law who, so actually was an only child, and his dad worked a lot around the world. So he had a really close relationship with his mum. And yeah, she was quite high risk for COVID in that she had lymphedema. And then Archie's dad, actually, he was in Russia working. And then there was a big second, like another sort of wave of COVID over there. And so they actually shut Russia down and he came home. But he had COVID, and then so subsequently she caught COVID. So that's just been literally so shit, and just you can't really put into words how it feels. I can't believe it's nearly 2 years because it still feels like we're learning. I think something that I've learned along the way is that every time you experience something that creates some kind of grief, whatever kind of grief it is, I think you can handle it in a completely different way. I don't think it's not like once you've gone through it once, you know how to deal with it. I think it's different every time. And Archie's amazing. He has been through a lot in his life and he's taught me a lot. He believes in a lot of like Buddhist things, and he's very into nature. So he works outside as a ranger in Hardcastle Cracks, which is a massive ancient woodland. And he gets a lot of comfort from that. And he still believes that his mum's with him. And, he believes that when you die, we're all connected through nature and sort of go back into the soil. And I think when I was younger, when I went through things like losing my Auntie Anne and then being poorly myself and my granddad, one thing that I struggled with was I didn't know what I believed about anything. Like, it's such a mindfuck. Like, it's just like life is just so crazy to get your head around it. But just recently, when we've lost Julie, the sort of things that Archie's talked about, I feel like it is quite comforting. Like I feel so much closer to nature now. But I think we're still learning how to handle it, really.
Thank you so much, Jess.
No, I feel like I've been rambling on.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted you to do.
Yeah.
really enjoying your story, but also just really feeling feeling the shape of it, and just how much you've been through, and how it feels like so much of what you've experienced now comes through your fingertips, and what you pour out in all the different mediums that you do.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You can find Jess online at jesskiddart.co.uk and on Instagram at jesskiddart, or head to the show notes for links. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of On the Irregular on Creativity and Grief. Please remember to review and subscribe, as it makes all the difference in helping other listeners find us.